It's Tuesday, May 5th, 1868. Flowers are in full bloom. Across the 37 states, the stench of a brutal and bloody civil war still fills the nation's nostrils, and it's time to remember those who gave their all. Next on the AM Update. Three years after the Civil War ended on May 5th, 1868, the head of an organization of Union veterans, the Grand Army of the Republic, established Decoration Day as a time for the nation to decorate the graves of the war dead with flowers. Major General John A. Logan declared it should be May 30th. It's believed the date was chosen because those flowers would be in bloom all over the country. The first large observance was held that year at Arlington National Cemetery across the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. The ceremonies centered around the mourning-draped veranda of the Arlington Mansion, once the home of General Robert E. Lee. Various Washington officials, including General and Mrs. Ulysses S. Grant, presided over the ceremonies. After speeches, children from the Soldiers and Sailors Orphan Home and members of the GAR made their way through the cemetery, strewing flowers on both Union and Confederate graves, reciting prayers and singing hymns. Arlington National Cemetery is no doubt the most well-known final resting place for hundreds of thousands of veterans from the Revolutionary War to today's conflicts. But that's not the only place where those brave men who risked and gave their all for the country can be found, of course. The thousands of cemeteries across our land are filled themselves with thousands of stories of bravery, heroism, and the greatest love of all, that a man would lay down his life for another. Two of those cemeteries are East Oak Grove Cemetery in Morgantown, West Virginia, and Riverside Cemetery, West Milton, Ohio. This Memorial Day, I want to tell you two of those stories, the stories of two men laid to rest at those two cemeteries. There's something about the conscientious objector that captures and stirs the emotions and confronts the reader or watcher, particularly the conscientious objector who, for whatever reason, insists against carrying weapons of war in combat, yet nonetheless serves in combat and serves with great bravery nonetheless. You've no doubt heard the story of Virginian Desmond T. Doss, a medic in World War II, a famous, perhaps the most famous, conscientious objector. You may have seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge. It's about Doss's life and his heroic episode during the Battle of Okinawa and how he saved lives of 50 to 100 wounded infantrymen atop the area known by the 96th Division as the Maida Escarpment. Doss was wounded 4 times in Okinawa, and he did all this while never carrying a weapon of war. But there are two other stories of conscientious objectors I think deserve being highlighted this Memorial Day, and both take place during the dubious Vietnam War. Joseph G. LaPointe Jr., or Guy, was born in Dayton, Ohio in July of 1948. He graduated from Northbridge High School in 1966 and then moved to Clayton, Ohio, taking up a job as a mail carrier. According to the Dayton Peace Museum, he loved nature and planned to attend college as a biology major. However, the Army drafted LaPointe in 1968 to serve in the Vietnam War. He finished his advanced training at Fort Sam in Houston, Texas, a couple of months later and became a combat medic. In November of that year, he deployed to Vietnam. In Vietnam, LaPointe treated wounded soldiers while in the field. However, he not only helped American soldiers, but also Vietnamese children. According to a battle buddy of LaPointe's in Vietnam, he would treat the Vietnamese children they came across, bandaging them and performing minor first aid. LaPointe served in the 101st Airborne Division as a Specialist 4. In June of 1969, he and his patrol came under attack, and 2 of his colleagues received serious injuries. They called for help, and LaPointe maneuvered his way quickly to answer their calls. LaPointe positioned himself as a shield against enemy fire in order to treat the wounded men. During his movement, an enemy round hit LaPointe. He continued to aid the wounded soldiers. He was struck again, but he continued to shield the soldiers from fire. However, an enemy grenade landed and detonated near the 3 soldiers, taking their lives. LaPointe posthumously received the Medal of Honor for his actions from Vice President Spiro Agnew in 1971. He also received a Silver Star and a Purple Heart. He was just 20 years old when his life was taken, and left behind a wife and son who never got to meet his father back in Ohio. He was laid to rest in Riverside Cemetery, West Milton, Ohio. Thomas William Bennett was born on April 7, 1947, in Morgantown, West Virginia, to Gail M. Miller Bennett and Thurman Lee Bennett. He was an honor student at Morgantown High School. After high school, he attended West Virginia University. At WVU, he blossomed into a leader, and the groundwork was laid for a young man who extended himself into his community as a speaker, facilitator, and worker. He was a planner, organizer, and a person who liked to bring people together. He was a devout Southern Baptist. He taught Sunday school, held Bible studies in his West Virginia University dormitory, and helped write the students' code of conduct. In the climate of the time, the mid-1960s, his philosophical sense of duty and faith, which had led him to a stance against the Vietnam War, would collide with the reality of the draft and the duty to register and serve. He was a patriotic young man who loved his country, but he also could not square his faith with the likelihood of killing other people while in service to his nation. But this was all theoretical, so long as he enjoyed academic deferral from the draft. By 1968, however, Thomas Bennett was on academic probation, and with the loss of protection granted by his academic status, he became exposed to the draft. Many of his friends had already signed up or been drafted and gone to war. Thomas registered as a conscientious objector who was willing to serve, and entered service in Fairmont, West Virginia in 1968, and was off to Fort Sam Houston for medic training. In January of 1969, he was in Vietnam, and he wrote his parents that he'd been assigned to Company B, and the next day he was scheduled for a helicopter ride out to meet his new unit. Quoting in part 1 Corinthians 13:11, he writes, "Tomorrow my journey begins, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. God help me. Love, Tom." His letters frequently ended with the word peace written in capital letters at the bottom of the page. About patriotism, he writes, "I will continue to serve my country within the limits of my personal conscience until I feel there is no longer any hope. At this point, I feel there is plenty of hope for changes in America," concluding, "I'll stick with her." But he was also aware of what patriotism could mean, writing, quote, "I will go and possibly die for a cause I vehemently disagree with." In February of 1969, the 1st Battalion, 14th Infantry, Company B, was in Vietnam, in the region of Chu Pa Mountain. The area had been quiet, but enemy forces were moving in. The 14th was there to patrol, seek out, and vanquish the enemy. Private Thomas Bennett was already with them. The after-action report issued by Robert B. Lander, Lieutenant Colonel, Infantry, documents that Company B and Company D were screening a ridge on the west side of Chu Pa Mountain as a 2-battalion attack was staged. Company B encountered unexpected terrain in a double-canopy jungle. Aerial reconnaissance failed to reveal the steepness of the terrain, the rock faces, and abandoned bunkers and caves. There had been no sign of the enemy. Company B advanced into the rock complex, and just as they were clearing it, the entire company came under withering fire from a ridge to their north. The volley of AK-47 machine gun B-40 rocket and mortar fire pinned down the company and divided it. But the unit leaders quickly adapted, returned fire, and began reassembling forces together. It was in this skirmish that Private First Class Bennett left his place of relative safety, rushed through heavy fire, and rendered aid to troops who had been wounded. He picked up one soldier and carried him to safety. On another rescue mission, Bennett was knocked down by the concussive force of a nearby explosion. According to eyewitnesses in his battalion, Bennett got back up, ran to the wounded man, and though they were in an exposed position, administered aid until the man was stable enough to move. The account continues with similar descriptions regarding 3 more men and 6 more, and then 1 more. Bennett was advised not to go after the remaining one because of the intensity of the small arms fire, but he did not hesitate. When he neared the last wounded man's position, he fell to small arms fire, mortally wounded. The same account is given by Sergeant Tomeo, who'd warned Thomas Bennett that his life was in danger due to the risks he was taking to treat the wounded. But Private First Class Bennett fearlessly kept on. Sergeant Smith wrote that Bennett's selfless actions inspired all of us and made us determined to defeat the enemy forces. His extreme bravery during the entire period of time was something you would have to observe in order to realize how really courageous he was. Bennett was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Honor on his birthday, April 7, 1970. He was laid to rest at East Oak Grove Cemetery, Morgantown, West Virginia. I said earlier, there's something about the conscientious objector that stirs the emotions, something confrontational as well. that one would willingly participate in war without participating in killing, that one would be willing to offer himself up as a living sacrifice in wars that sometimes can't be won and fought on dubious at best grounds, and would show seemingly boundless love against a hellish, Agent Orange-tinged backdrop like Vietnam. It's a confrontation of the apathy and nihilism so pervasive in our world today. It's someone who stands for something good, true, and beautiful and puts his life where his mouth is. Indeed, Thomas W. Bennett understood this. Before leaving for Vietnam, Bennett wrote the following prayer. "O God, shake me from my apathy, from my wanderings of mind. Create in me discipline, concern, and love. Help me live, really live, in spirit and the truth." Remember those who gave their all today. Remember, thank God, and appreciate it. But if that's all we're doing, if we don't take up the burden that previous generations did and gave their lives for, we're doing something wrong. Be like Joseph LaPointe and Thomas Bennett. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.